Alright everybody, it's time for my favorite category, the top 5 best narratives of 2015. You all know I absolutely love storytelling. It's been a big aspiration of mine to actually get into storytelling in the video game industry. I want to, direct, produce, and write video games. Pretty cool. So this category is always something I look forward to, and of course when I play every single video game, the story, a really good story is what I'm really looking for. So alright, without further ado, let's get to the top 5 best narratives of 2015. Number 5, Wolfenstein The Old Blood. So, I'm sure a lot of people forgot that this game came out. And when I was thinking about the games that came out in 2015, this one kind of fell under the radar really quickly. This was a prequel, really, to Wolfenstein The New Order, which was one of my favorite games of 2014. And The Old Blood really just kind of, gives you this big build-up to what happens in The New Order. So, pretty freaking awesome. You have an original cast here, which is kind of cool, and each of them have some really nice personalities. And you kind of just go through sort of like a 6-hour adventure, I would say, and it's just a lot of fun. The amazing shooting mechanics are back, great stealth, great visuals, and just to boot, a really interesting and cool narrative that really does add to the game. There's a nice twist somewhere between the latter half of the game here. And it just it's really awesome when it happens because it's totally unexpected, and it actually it takes this fun element that many games put in as like a separate mode, and it just adds it to the story, and it kind of makes sense too. So I really enjoyed this story for Wolfenstein The Old Blood. I thought it was really good and just really well written. It didn't take itself super seriously, but at the same time you felt that the stakes were there and you cared what was going on with the characters and what was happening with the world, and you had a purpose, and they really defined that really well. So Wolfenstein The Old Blood earns my number 5 pick for top 5 best narratives. Number 4, Fallout 4. So Fallout 4's narrative was a huge improvement, in my opinion, over Fallout 3's narrative. My only big issue here with Fallout 4 is that the endings are very much the same depending on who you go to. It really doesn't matter. But there is a lot of emotional, character development in this story. Surprisingly, I think that was kind of lacking in Fallout 3. Is that you had a good story, right? But it didn't feel like you were this very voiceless protagonist, let's say, and it's like, oh, okay, you're doing this, you're doing that, and everything's happening to you, but your character isn't reacting in any way. And this is kind of like the hard thing. Only few games that have voiceless, faceless, protagonists really end up crafting a good story, because it's very hard to pull that off. Like, if the character can't speak, if the character can't react to what's going on, then why would you care? If they don't care, then why would you care? And that's the whole thing. There's only a few games that I can name, like for example, the original BioShock, which had a voiceless and faceless protagonist, ended up having a great story, was able to really convey its story well. Fallout 4's narrative is really cool because I think the stakes are higher because it's more personal. Being that you can either be the mother or father of a child, and your child's been kidnapped, and you're kind of out in the wasteland looking for them, and it feels like a journey. It feels like it should be. Of course, it's hard for games like this to convey a immediate importance when you can do whatever you want whenever you want. And that's kind of the hardest thing with a game like Fallout to do, is like, how do we tell like an interesting, good narrative, but also make allow the player to go out there and do whatever he or she wants to whenever they want to. And so a lot of the times you'll be sitting here saying, all right, well, my son's missing, but I'll go do 25 hours of side content. And that can be hard. But when the story is there, when you are continuing on with it, it does feel very personal, and there's a strong emotion between the characters and how they interact. And I said this before in my impressions, but I do believe that Fallout that playing as a female character in Fallout 4 yields a better overall emotional storyline, just because it's a little bit different than playing as the male character. You feel the female character, it kind of feels like, you know, a more, I guess, emotional journey, because I don't want to really put gender into it, but that's just how it goes. Like, the whole mother searching for her son thing fits more than the whole father searching for his son thing. You get more emotion out of the female side than you do with the male side, and it feels more natural. At the same time, I do think that the story had some really interesting twists and, you know, stuff that you weren't even expecting, which is pretty cool, and that helped really make the stakes much higher, and also make it much more entertaining and interesting. So while some may not agree with me personally on this choice for Fallout 4 being in the best narratives, I do think that Fallout 4 did a good job with its narrative, more so than most of the stuff that it did. So that's my opinion on Fallout 4. Number 4 for best narrative. Number 3, Everybody's Gone to the Rapture. So there's a lot of controversy surrounding this game when it came out, because it's not, you know, a really action-packed game. And I do want to touch on this topic in a gameplay discussion coming up about what constitutes a game, because I don't think it's fair how people can just label something based off, you know, what it is, or what they think, you know, and just say, okay, it's not a game because you don't do anything. But that's a different topic for a different time. Talking about Everybody's Gone to the Rapture's narrative, this is a very, very interesting narrative, and it's one that I think is original and not many games have touched upon. You all know I mentioned in my top 5 best soundtracks that this game has very religious tones, and that's very apparent throughout your playthrough of the game. You know, the story has a very religious undertone to the whole thing, and you kind of get that sense, because, you know, the characters are talking about, you know, God, the afterlife, and it's an older time period, and so religion's really at the forefront of what's going on here. But it's interesting because there's also this mystery of where everybody has gone, and as the title says, you might think to yourself, all right, well, that just gives it away. But it's not about the end result, it's about the journey. And finding out what happens to these characters before they leave this world is really what the meat of the whole story is. The only negative thing I can say regarding the story is how the game allows you to just skip through most of the stuff. If you actually go to certain points at certain times, you can completely skip pretty much most of the entire narrative, like the meat of the narrative, and just get to the end really, really quickly. And it kind of sucks. When you do take your time with this game and you play it in bursts, if you try to play this game all in one sitting, you're going to get bored out of your mind. So play it for like an hour and a half, take a break, then come back to it, you know, hours later, and play it for another hour and a half, and do that. But its story, really emotional characters, really interesting narrative. You know, it's a new take on the afterlife and what happens when we die, and that's what I really appreciated about this game's narrative, is how it was able to do that. So definitely, I wouldn't recommend that if you're not the type of person who's into this artsy, type of style of game, where you don't want to, walk around and do stuff, at least watch a playthrough online. It is really interesting for the narrative, and I think it's one that will get you thinking in a way that no other video game has about this subject matter to date. Number 2, Life is Strange. I absolutely loved this game. This game was exceptional as far as its story goes. And the only major issue I have with it was the fact that they ended it on a very kind of lacking note. But, again, I'm not going to dock it the whole thing because it didn't get the ending that I wanted it to have. It didn't have the stakes that kind of matched up at the end. The whole journey of Life is Strange is absolutely incredible. This game has some of the best emotional character development that you have ever played in the video game. Like, it's right up there with some of the best, storytellings for video games of our time. Like, it's really up there. And the developers, the writer, did a fantastic job of just creating a story that felt real and grounded, but gave it a supernatural twist. The whole concept of the game is that you can rewind time and fix your mistakes. But this game has you make incredibly tough choices, and I mean like choices that rival. I don't even want to say rival. Choices that even exceed that of The Walking Dead's season 1 from Telltale Games. And it's right up there with that strong emotional character development that the original Walking Dead season 1 did from Telltale Games. It's right up there. Fantastic list of characters who all were well developed and felt like they had a good purpose in the storyline. Your choices, for the most part in the game, actually had significance through each episode, but unfortunately didn't live up at the end. I don't know why games do this. They have like a cop-out between, alright, it's like the writer gets lazy and says, alright, I'll create all these different strings, and I'll just pull all these strings together to these 1 or 2 possibilities at the very end. And I don't understand why. Maybe it has to do with laziness. Maybe they just don't know how. But there has to be somehow in the future a way for, episodic games who do have choices that do impact the next episodes to somehow link to completely different endings. That would be the ultimate storytelling master for an episodic game. If you haven't played Life is Strange, it is getting a physical release very, very soon. I highly recommend you pick it up. It is fantastic. It's one of the best episodic games I can recommend. And, they just did a fantastic job of just creating a really, really great emotional narrative. So definitely test this game out if you haven't. It's coming out very soon for physical. And, yeah, absolutely great game. Number 1, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. So I don't think I need to explain myself of why I think this is number 1 out of the, best storylines of 2015. The Witcher 3 was just an incredible game all around. I mean, you had some of the best graphics, you had really, really great gameplay, you had an amazing storyline, and, it's just fantastic because I never played the original Witcher, but I did play Witcher 2. And prior to Witcher 3 coming out, I kind of went back to Witcher 2 because I never beat it the first time I played it. And I replayed the events of Witcher 2, and I really tried to get myself through it. And I thought Witcher 2 was okay, right? It was just okay. For me, it wasn't like the biggest, grandest, best game ever. It was just alright. So Witcher 3, when I went into it, I wasn't, I saw the gameplay, we saw the press media, the coverage and stuff surrounding the game's release. But I wasn't expecting this grand thing, and I was really surprised. They really streamlined the game and made it really interesting, a lot of fun, and they just improved on it in every single freaking aspect. The narrative of this game is incredible. It's got great characters, a great, varied cast of characters that all somehow, that all feel like they somehow impact the storyline in their own way. You have choices that lead up to different consequences. Characters will hate you, characters will die depending on what you do. And, it really feels like this grand epic journey that's really awesome. And as you're leading up to, the events of trying to find this missing girl, Ciri, you're going back and replaying events of her past and what she did. And that moment, when you finally do catch up to her, it's this really emotional, great scene. And I also want to give points to the side content. This game has some of the best side content I ever played in a video game. Like, it's just amazing. You had there's this one particular side content that really really got to me. It really hit me in the heart, especially when you can relate to it. It was this side content between the Witcher Geralt and his I guess you can say his girlfriend, Yennefer. And they had like this troubled past. They're always like kind of fighting and getting back to each other, and it was like this constant thing of breaking up, getting back with one another, and then breaking up again and getting back with one another. And there's this side content this one side mission devoted to this, and it was just this beautiful side mission that, my God, it was really just there to bring up character development, and it did it in the best way possible. And it really was emotional too. I was almost getting teary there watching this unfold, just because of how beautiful that sequence was, and how amazing, you know, the character development was, and just what they were able to pull off, and how awesome it was. And especially, again, like, if you can relate to what was going on, it was amazing. So I think CD Projekt Red just crafted an incredible narrative here. I mean, they really know how to craft great storylines. I'm really excited for, you know, Cyberpunk 2077 to release in the next few years, and I really know that, you know, I really have confidence that they're going to create something incredible. So The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is my best narrative of 2015, an incredible storyline, an incredible game all around, and definitely worth your time. Alright everybody, those were my top 5 best narratives of 2015. Let me know what you guys think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments. Look forward to reading your responses. Alright, so that is it for the meat of the VGAs. Our next category will be our top 5 most anticipated games of 2016. What I am looking forward to the most. And there are tons of games in 2016. Unfortunately, I had to narrow it down to only 5, but really, I'm just excited for gaming all around next year. So, alright, let's get on with our last category, the top 5 most anticipated games of 2016.